Welcome to another Dynam-ICS production, helping you better understand the incident command system. Before we get into the planning P, I want to take just a minute to explain who we are, why this video exists, and what this series is actually about. Dynam-ICS Training Solutions is a Canadian-based ICS training and consulting company focused on non-emergency service agencies. That includes industry, healthcare, public works, municipalities, First Nations, and organizations that don't live and breathe emergency response, but still regularly find themselves managing complex incidents. Our approach is simple. ICS doesn't need to change, but how we teach ICS absolutely does. If you haven't already, check out our 4-part video series here on YouTube, as well as our Mark the ICS Rebel blog series, where you'll find all of our LinkedIn posts collected in one place. That's where we break down common ICS concepts that are widely taught but often misunderstood, overcomplicated, or applied out of context. In this video, we're focusing specifically on the planning P. The planning P is one of the most misunderstood diagrams in ICS training. Not because it's complicated, but because of how it's traditionally explained. And with that being said, the planning P and its associated meetings is, in my opinion, one of the most valuable tools available for managing incidents that are moving into extended or sustained operational timelines. One of the biggest sources of confusion is that the traditional planning P diagram, originally developed in the United States and even more so in the Canadian version, mixes forward planning with questions about who is managing the incident. In those versions, you'll often see references to unified command meetings, agency administrator briefings, and formal ICS 201 briefings shown as part of the planning cycle. That's not accurate, and it sends the message that these things must occur before planning can begin, or that planning somehow depends on a change in command structure. In reality, planning is about thinking ahead, not about who's in charge. In the Dynam-ICS version, we clean up the stem of the planning P and bring it back to reality, so it actually makes sense and doesn't confuse forward planning with questions of command or governance. We'll unpack that more in the next slide. Before we continue, a quick note on use and permissions. This video is intended for education and training purposes only. It does not replace your organization's policies, procedures, or legal requirements, and it does not override the authority of your jurisdiction or agency having authority. ICS should always be applied in a way that aligns with your organizational policies, legislation, and operational realities. This video may not be downloaded, copied, modified, or used for profit, and it may not be redistributed without express written consent from Dynam-ICS Training Solutions. However, we do authorize this video to be used directly from the YouTube link as part of internal training or educational materials within your organization. With that context in mind, let's take a look at how the planning P is commonly taught and why we've taken a different approach. To understand why the planning P looks the way it does, it helps to understand where it came from. The planning P was originally developed in a wildfire environment. In large wildfire incidents, it was common for several things to happen at roughly the same time. As incidents grew, agencies would often move into unified command, establish a more formal incident management team, and begin forward planning for upcoming operational periods, all in parallel. Because those steps frequently happen together in that specific context, they were visually grouped together in the planning P diagram. The problem is that over time, that diagram started to be treated as a universal rule instead of a context-specific example. In today's all-kinds world, ICS is used far beyond wildfire. It's used in industry, healthcare, public works, municipalities, infrastructure failures, and a wide range of non-emergency service environments. In many of those incidents, unified command may never apply at all, or it may already be in place long before formal planning begins. Forward planning and who is managing the incident are not the same thing, and they don't have a direct relationship. The intent of the planning P was never about changing command structures. Its real purpose is to help teams move from reacting in the moment to planning ahead for defined chunks of work. Those chunks of work are what ICS calls operational periods. Operational periods are simply time-bound windows where specific objectives are set, resources are assigned, and progress is evaluated. You often can't fix everything at once. You solve the most critical problems first, then move on to the next set of problems and then the next, each within a defined time frame. That's what the Planning P was designed to support. Structured forward planning for operational periods, not decisions about unified command, not changes in who's managing the incident, and not administrative briefings. When we separate those concepts, the Planning P becomes much easier to understand, much easier to apply, and far more useful across today's wide range of incidents. Let's take a step back for a moment to part 1 of the ICS Basics series and remind ourselves about incident typing. Incident typing is simply a way to describe the size, complexity, and expected duration of an incident. Additionally, it looks at the effect on the community, critical infrastructure, and key resources such as communication towers, municipal buildings, water plants, and so on, the critical things that make your community function daily. It helps us set expectations early and gives us a common reference point for what level of coordination and management might be needed. At the simplest end of the scale are Type 5 incidents. These are everyday issues. They're usually handled by a small number of people wrapped up in a short period of time and don't require much structure beyond basic coordination. Type 4 incidents are bigger, but still mostly local. They often involve multiple agencies, last longer than expected, and usually come with follow-up work. That might include investigations, repairs, recovery activities, or public communication after the initial response is over. Type 3 incidents are more serious and typically last multiple days. At this level, incidents usually require written plans, structured meetings, and someone specifically focused on managing operations over time. Types 2 and 1 are much less common and involve regional or national impacts, long durations, and very large numbers of people and organizations. Most non-emergency service agencies will rarely, if ever, operate at these levels. The reason incident typing matters here is because it helps us decide when we need to start thinking about forward planning, who needs to be involved, and why. Incident typing by itself doesn't make that decision. What really drives it is the combination of ongoing situational awareness and a complexity analysis, which we'll talk about in the next slide. If an incident is clearly staying in the Type 5 range, you likely don't need a formal planning process at all. You can remain in the action cycle and manage the incident as it unfolds. However, if an incident begins to take on the characteristics of a Type 4, appears to be growing in size or complexity, and has the potential to move into multiple operational periods, that's when you need to seriously consider formal advanced planning. At that point, planning isn't about paperwork for the sake of paperwork. It's about setting clear objectives, thinking ahead in defined timeframes, and coordinating work across operational periods. That process results in a written incident action plan and operational period briefings that support sustained operations. Understanding incident typing helps us recognize when we're crossing that threshold and when it's time to shift from reacting to planning ahead. The incident commander is ultimately responsible for the complexity analysis. That said, doing it in isolation without involving the incident management team would be a mistake. Complexity analysis is far more effective when it includes multiple perspectives. On most Type 5 and many Type 4 incidents, there isn't much deliberate thought given to formal incident typing or detailed evaluation. The incident is handled much like any other day when something goes sideways. It gets dealt with and everyone moves on. Every now and then, though, something feels different. The incident commander's spidey senses start to tingle. Maybe the incident isn't responding to normal efforts. Maybe it's something they don't deal with very often. Or maybe they can simply see the writing on the wall. That's good situational awareness, and it's usually what triggers the thought, we should probably take a closer look at where this incident might be heading. That's where complexity analysis comes in. There are many variables that factor into a complexity analysis, and what matters most often depends on the priorities of your community or organization. This slide shows a solid reference tool from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States. It looks at things like effects on the community, challenges with stabilizing the incident, anticipated recovery time, impacts to critical infrastructure, and the likelihood of cascading or worsening conditions. There's no single right way to do a complexity analysis. Some people treat it like a checklist. Others rely more on professional judgment. Some focus on the indicators that stand out the most. It's a tool. Use it in a way that works best for you and reflects the realities of your community. Once the analysis is complete and you've determined what incident type this event is or may be becoming, that's when key decisions can be made. Do we need to start forward planning? Do we need a written incident action plan? Is our current incident management team adequate, or do we need additional qualified support? Are there unusual or hard-to-source resources we should begin planning for now? All of this can happen while current operations continue in the background. Nothing stops just because you start thinking ahead. And here's the key takeaway. Moving into the planning cycle, adjusting the incident management team, and identifying unusual resource needs are related considerations, but they are not the same thing. They can happen independently, and they don't automatically trigger one another. That's why we've been intentional about separating forward planning from the question of who is managing the incident. They are two different topics, and treating them that way makes the planning P far clearer and far more useful. Before we move further into the planning P, it's important to pause and connect this back to the Dynam-ICS action cycle, which we covered in detail in part 2 of this video series. For Type 5 and Type 4 incidents, this action cycle is the primary way incidents are managed from start to finish. Something happens, it's recognized, the situation is assessed, a plan is formed, assignments are given, work gets done, and then the situation is reassessed. If there's still work to do, the cycle repeats. Wash, rinse, repeat. In those lower complexity incidents, that cycle will usually carry you all the way to the end of the event. There's no need for formal operational periods, written incident action plans, or structured planning meetings. You plan just enough to solve the problem in front of you, and then you move on. What's important to understand is that this action cycle doesn't disappear as incidents get larger. The characteristics of the cycle are still there all the way up to Type 1 incidents. What changes is how the planning happens. As incidents start to move into Type 3 territory, we begin to shift from informal, on-the-fly planning into deliberate forward planning. That's where the planning P comes in. The planning P is not a replacement for the action cycle. It's a structured way to organize that same thinking when incidents extend over multiple operational periods. Once the first forward planning operational period is established, the planning P naturally evolves into what we refer to as the operational O. At that point, planning, briefing, operations, and reassessment continue in a predictable rhythm from one operational period to the next. So the key takeaway here is simple. The action cycle and the planning P are not competing models. They are the same system applied at different levels of complexity. Type 5 and 4 incidents live almost entirely in the action cycle. Starting around Type 3, that same cycle expands into formal forward planning. And that's the bridge between everyday incident management and the planning cycle. As we progress through the wash, rinse, repeat rhythm of the action cycle we just talked about, there may come a point where the incident commander starts to think, I'd better take a harder look at this. That moment can happen at almost any point in the cycle, but most often it shows up during Step 3, the assessment stage. By this point, operations are already moving along. Work is getting done, immediate problems are being addressed, and the incident isn't sitting idle. That creates a small window for the incident commander to step back and reassess the incident as a whole, not just what's happening right in front of them. This is where broader questions start to surface. Is this incident responding the way we expected? Is it stabilizing, or is it resisting our normal efforts? Are there indicators that this could last longer, involve more resources, or begin affecting other parts of the organization or community? This is also where situational awareness expands beyond the task level and into the incident level. Instead of just asking, what do we need to fix next? The question becomes, where is this incident going? That's the natural point where an incident commander may decide to look deeper, not to change command, not to reorganize the team, but to better understand the potential complexity of the incident. And that's what leads us into complexity analysis. It's important to note that while this assessment and analysis is happening, operations don't stop. Crews keep working. Assignments continue. The incident is still being managed in real time. What's happening in parallel is a shift in thinking, from short-term problem solving to the possibility that this incident may require forward planning, defined operational periods, and a more deliberate planning process. That transition doesn't start with the planning P. It starts right here, during assessment, when someone pauses long enough to ask the right questions.
Hi, I'm Ash, RebelMark's right-hand AI sidekick. I'm going to take over for a minute and walk you through the phases of the planning P stem, step by step, until we reach the operational O. After that, Isley is going to jump in. We're starting with the stem of the planning P because it's the most important and most misunderstood part of the whole process. This is the beginning. We're still in the action cycle. We're still in the early stages of a Type 5 or Type 4 incident, working through initial operations, but we're also starting to think, something's different about this one. That moment can happen on the first trip through the action cycle or the 10th. There's no set number. But trust me, if you have good situational awareness, you'll know. Now, we're going to move up one step in the stem. Up to this point, we've been in initial operations, working through the action cycle, but now the incident commander, with support from their personnel, is starting to think, yeah, this one isn't going to be solved today. This is the point where it makes sense to slow down just enough to do a formal complexity analysis and get a clearer picture of where this incident is heading, not a paperwork exercise. A real discussion about what we're seeing, what we expect, and what that means for the next operational period, and likely the next few after that. After some serious discussion with command and general staff, and with the agency having jurisdiction, we're confident this incident has the potential for sustained operations. And if that's the case, we may need to move into a formal planning cycle with a written incident action plan. In plain language, we're going to be here for a bit. So this is where we start making a few parallel decisions. Do we have the right team for what's coming? Do we need more resources or specialized support? And most importantly, is it time to shift from informal planning to structured, forward planning? If the answer is yes, then we also need to notify anyone who needs to know that we're taking it up a notch, and we need to document what we found and why we made that decision. Because once you commit to sustained operations, the incident doesn't just need effort, it needs a plan. Knowing that we're moving the incident into advanced planning, the next step is deciding when we are going to start the first official formal operational period under the planning cycle. In reality, this might be the second operational period, or it might be the fourth, depending on how long operations were already underway before the decision was made to move toward a written incident action plan and a formal planning process. The key question is simple: when does the formal process begin? Several factors can influence that decision. If we are continuing with the current incident management team, they are already in place, already engaged, and we may be able to move forward immediately. If additional or more experienced IMT personnel are being brought in, or if a unified command structure is being established, it may make more sense to remain in the action cycle until those personnel arrive and are properly integrated, including briefings, delegations of authority, and related transition activities. Resource considerations can also play a role. If upcoming operations will require specialized or hard-to-find resources, that timing may influence when the first formal operational period should begin, so planning can properly support those needs. Ultimately, the decision depends on the realities of the incident. For this example, let's assume the decision has been made to begin the first formal operational period tomorrow morning at 0800 hours. That will mark the start of our first written incident action plan and the beginning of structured operational period briefings moving forward. In this case, the formal operational period briefing would typically take place around 0700 hours, about 1 hour before the operational period begins. This allows sufficient time for the briefing itself, often no longer than about 30 minutes, and sometimes much shorter, followed by time for supervisors and team leads to brief their personnel, prepare equipment, move into position, and be fully ready to begin operations right at 0800. This step in the action cycle is where the incident commander and operations step back and assess how things are going right now. And remember, operations are still running. Nothing stops just because we're planning. At this point, the IC and Ops may make minor adjustments to current operations if needed, but their focus is also beginning to shift toward what tomorrow's 0800 operational period needs to look like. If there are going to be changes to the incident management team, whether that means adding personnel, expanding the structure, or bringing in a new IMT, this is typically where that transition begins. Incoming personnel have already been briefed and, if required, provided with delegation of authority. Now they shadow the existing team. They observe how decisions are being made, how information flows, and how the team is functioning, so they can step in seamlessly without disrupting operations. Once current operations are stable and predictable, attention moves more deliberately toward building the next plan. Even though the first formal operational period doesn't begin until tomorrow morning, planning is happening while today's operations continue. That balance is critical. We could be several hours into planning when something changes on the ground that affects the entire proposed plan for the next operational period. That's normal. This phase is a constant back and forth, monitoring current operations while shaping what comes next. Formal and informal communication is happening all day. Updates, check-ins, quick conversations, shared observations, all feeding into the developing plan. Information sharing is key. The stronger the communication between operations, command, and planning, the stronger and more realistic the plan will be when the new operational period begins. And with that foundation in place, we're ready to move fully into the operational O. I'm going to hand this over to Isley now, who will walk you through what happens once that new operational period planning officially begins.
Hi, I'm Isley. I'm going to take you through the remainder of the planning cycle, step by step. The first stop is the strategy meeting, sometimes called the Command and General Staff meeting. This is where the incident commander comes in with their proposed objectives for the upcoming operational period and shares them with the group. This meeting is the first of a few and usually starts early in the planning cycle. It sets direction for the rest of the team and it sets the timelines for the meetings to follow. And this meeting matters because an incident action plan isn't just an operations plan. It has a lot of moving parts: operations, planning, logistics, finance, and safety considerations. So before anyone starts building assignments or building pieces of the IAP, the team needs a shared understanding of what the incident commander is thinking and where she believes the incident is headed. Trust me when I say the IC has had in-depth involvement and discussion with their team all along the way. She doesn't just come in and start barking orders. In this meeting, the group reviews the IC's objectives, asks questions, and makes sure they're realistic, clear, and aligned with everyone's perspective of what's actually happening on the ground. As a team, they start to brainstorm high-level strategies, not detailed tactics yet, just the general how behind the objectives. The operations section chief, if one is assigned, plays a major role in shaping strategies and later tactics based on the IC's intent, the objectives. This is also where team responsibilities and timelines get confirmed, especially if there are IMT changes or new personnel integrating into the team. This is an ideal moment for quick introductions and a confirmation of responsibilities, so everyone knows who's who and who's doing what before the planning process accelerates. Once the objectives and basic strategies are confirmed, the incident commander hands that direction over to operations and planning. The operations section chief leaves this meeting with a solid understanding of commander's intent, the what and the why, so they can start building the how and the who. From here, the group disperses and the operations section chief begins preparing for the next step, the tactics meeting. The operations section chief will announce to the group when and where the tactics meeting will take place. And in the meantime, everyone will go do their thing. Only the team members who need to be at the tactics meeting will be requested to be there. Next up in the cycle is the tactics meeting. But before we get into it, let's step back and look at the operations section chief's preparation coming into this meeting. Before it even begins, the OSC has already done the groundwork. They've confirmed the strategies tied to each of the IC's objectives and built initial team assignments for the upcoming operational period. Who is doing what, where they're working, and what resources they'll need. That preparation allows the tactics meeting to stay focused and efficient, centered on two critical questions. First, do we have or can we obtain the resources required to support each assignment? Second, and most importantly, can we carry out this plan safely? During the meeting, team assignments are reviewed and pressure tested. Resource requirements are verified through planning and logistics. The resource unit leader should have a clear picture of what resources are currently assigned, what will be available next operational period, what is forecasted, and what can realistically be sourced in time. It's not as simple as saying we have 3 water pumps. If 2 are committed to assignments that carry over into tomorrow's operational period, then you really only have 1 available for new work. That level of clarity matters. At the same time, the safety officer evaluates each proposed assignment, hazards are identified, and required mitigation measures are discussed. If mitigation isn't achievable, the safety officer has delegated authority from the incident commander to stop that assignment. In practice, that's rarely dramatic, it's usually a team discussion. But if something cannot be done safely, safety can overrule. When that happens, strategies and possibly even objectives may need to be adjusted. That's exactly why the tactics meeting exists. And here's something many instructors miss. This meeting is not about filling out ICS forms. It's about validating resources and safety. Yes, tools like the ICS 215 and 250A can support the process, but they are just tools. Don't get hung up on paperwork. What matters is having a clear process to confirm resource availability and conduct a solid safety analysis. If the plan passes those 2 tests, resource support and safety, it moves forward. And just for perspective, these meetings are not meant to be long. I've seen tactics meetings take as little as 10 minutes. This is focused, efficient work. Get in, confirm the plan, and move on. Once that's done, we're ready to prepare for the planning meeting. Let's talk about preparation for the planning meeting. The planning section chief manages most of the planning cycle, with the exception of the tactics meeting. So it's the planning chief who sets the time and location of the planning meeting, notifies everyone who needs to attend, and clarifies the agenda and each person's role. Preparation includes getting the room ready and finalizing the draft incident action plan. This is where the planning team dots the I's and crosses the T's, cleaning up the content developed in strategy and tactics and organizing it into a usable document. Information from the strategy meeting and the tactics meeting is transferred into the appropriate ICS forms if you're using them. If you're not using ICS forms, that's fine, but the order of information should remain consistent and interoperable so other agencies can easily follow it. A formal IAP should include a cover page with the incident name and the date and time of the operational period, incident objectives, names and contact information for command and general staff, a page for each assignment, including the assignment, who's in charge, assigned resources, and communications, a communications plan, a medical plan, a safety message, and any supporting documents such as maps or charts. That order matters. Agencies that use formal IAPs expect consistency. When information is organized properly, people know exactly where to find what they need. The planning meeting itself is where the completed draft IAP is presented in its entirety to the incident commander and command and general staff. In many ways, it's a confirmation meeting. Everyone has already played a role in building the plan. Now they see it assembled as one coherent document. There shouldn't be major changes at this point, but if adjustments are needed, this is the time to make them. The planning section chief runs the meeting. Each section speaks their portion. Questions are addressed. Concerns are resolved. Once there is agreement, the planning chief looks for confirmation that the plan is accepted. The incident commander can then approve any outstanding resource orders. Following the meeting, planning finalizes the document, prepares the clean version, and presents it to the IC for review and formal sign-off. And with that, the IAP is ready to be briefed for the upcoming operational period. The plan has now been developed, everyone has played their role in building the pieces, and the planning staff have finalised the incident action plan, assembling everything into one organised package. For that operational period, the IAP includes the objectives, the management structure, who's who in IC, command and general staff, and detailed operational team assignments. Each assignment outlines who's in charge, what resources they have, what they're doing, where they're working, and how to communicate with them. Next is the communications plan, how everyone talks to each other. Radios, cell phones, satellite phones, text, whatever systems are being used. Then come two critical components. The medical plan, for responders, outlines where first aid kits and AEDs are located, how to request an ambulance, where the nearest hospitals are, and what to do in both minor and major emergencies. And then the safety message. Some say it's optional, but if safety is our number one responsibility to responders, why wouldn't we include it? Now we move to the operational period briefing. We've decided the operational period begins at 800 hours, so the briefing takes place at 700. That gives enough time to review the plan and still allow teams to prepare before work begins. During the briefing, each person who contributed to the plan speaks to their portion. The planning section chief typically facilitates and calls each section forward. The operational period briefing should be efficient. It should never exceed 30 minutes, and that would be long. I've seen them done in under 12. This is not a discussion meeting. Phones off, no side conversations. Here's the plan. Let's execute. After the briefing, teams finalize logistics, conduct quick internal huddles, confirm equipment and assignments, and move into position. At 0800 hours sharp, the operational period begins. And just like that, we're back into execution, carrying out the plan we built.
Thanks, AISLey. Great job. I'll jump in here and walk through the final details before we shift into a broader discussion. The clock strikes 0800 hours, and operations begin. Teams are out executing their assignments, focused and getting to work. We'll give them time to settle into their tasks before conducting any check-ins. That pause allows command and general staff to catch up on their support responsibilities, documentation, coordination, tracking, and all the behind-the-scenes work that keeps things moving. We've got capable teams and strong leaders in place. If something unusual arises, they'll call. That's how the system works. Empowered leaders doing their jobs. In the meantime, there's no shortage of responsibilities at the ICP. Planning continues to monitor, logistics supports, finance tracks, safety observes. The machine keeps running. Now, I want to step away from the operational tempo for a moment and talk more about the information that goes into an IAP, not just the structure, but the thinking behind it. Follow me to the next slide, and let's dig into that. Okay, so technically, a formal incident action plan is built using specific ICS forms. Bear with me for a minute while I introduce them. Don't worry, I'll translate this into plain language right after. But I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't show you how it's supposed to be structured. First, the cover page. This identifies the incident name, the operational period number, date, and time. It tells everyone exactly which plan they're looking at, so nobody grabs the wrong one. Next is ICS Form 202, Incident Objectives. This lists the objectives for that specific operational period, along with general awareness information such as weather, key priorities, and situational awareness notes. It also includes a list of all pages in the IAP so people can quickly see if anything went missing during printing. Then we have ICS Form 203, Organizational Assignment List. This shows the management structure for that operational period, who's filling command and general staff roles, unit leaders, and operational team leaders. After that are one or more ICS Form 204s, assignment lists. There is usually one 204 for each operational team. It outlines the assignment, the team leader, assigned resources, work location, and the relevant communications information for that team. Next is ICS Form 205 Communications Plan. This details radio frequencies, talk groups, phone numbers, and other communication systems being used so everyone knows how to connect. Use caution when including sensitive numbers in case the document ends up in the wrong hands. Then comes ICS Form 206, Medical Plan. This identifies medical aid stations, ambulance procedures, hospital locations and contact numbers, and what to do in the event of an injury. And finally, ICS Form 208, Safety Message or Safety Plan. This outlines key hazards for the operational period and the mitigation measures required to keep responders safe. Beyond those, you may also see supporting documentation, maps, weather reports, traffic plans, or other attachments that help teams execute effectively. That's the technical structure of a formal IAP. All right, some of the hardcore form purists might not love this one, but hey, this is the rebel reality. Here's the part people don't always say out loud. On the previous slide, I walked you through the official ICS forms that make up a formal incident action plan. And let me be clear, when I'm serving as planning section chief, I use those forms. I follow the order. I build a legitimate incident action plan exactly the way doctrine outlines it. But many non-emergency service agencies struggle with the forms. And that's understandable. They're formal, they can feel wildfire-centric, and they don't always translate smoothly into industry, healthcare, public works, or municipal environments. So here's the practical rebel approach. ICS forms can absolutely be adapted to your agency. What cannot change, and this is important, is the form number, the form name, the intent of the form. Why? Because that's what creates interoperability. My Form 202 should mean the same thing as your Form 202. A Form 205 is a communications plan, period. That shared language is what allows agencies to plug into each other without confusion. Now here's where I lean rebel. If you need to, use a blank sheet of paper, write ICS Form 203 at the top. Build your organizational assignment list in a format that makes sense to your team. As long as the intent of the form is respected and the information is clearly communicated, you're still operating within the ICS system. An incident action plan is not about impressing someone with perfectly formatted paperwork. It's about clearly communicating objectives, structure, assignments, communications, medical procedures, and safety. If you can do that and maintain interoperability through numbering and intent, you're doing it right. One more practical tip, put a signature on it. Incident name, operational period, date, time, signature of whoever's in charge, boom. Now you've got functional documentation that will stand up later if needed. We'll just call this our quiet rebel understanding. All right, we stepped away to talk IAP structure. Now let's get back to the real world. I checked in with the team leaders. For the most part, things are flowing exactly the way we planned. That's what a solid planning cycle does. It sets people up to succeed. Were there hiccups? Of course. A couple logistical issues popped up. One assignment turned out to be bigger than we originally estimated. So we adjusted, we shifted resources, we extended the timeline on that objective, and that's the point of timelines. When you set a time frame on an objective, you're making an educated estimate. You're throwing a dart based on experience, complexity, and available resources. It won't always be perfect, but it gives everyone a benchmark, a target, something measurable. Without timelines, you're just working on it. With timelines, you're managing it. Now the operational period is humming along. Teams are working, support functions are supporting, safety is watching, finance is tracking. So what's next? As incident commander, I don't sit back and admire the machine. I start looking ahead. I'll pull in operations, we'll assess progress, then bring command and general staff together for the next strategy meeting. And we do it again. New objectives, refined strategies, adjusted tactics. Just like your Type 5 and Type 4 incidents, it's the same action cycle. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's the rhythm of sustained operations. Just to give you some perspective, timelines for meetings will always vary. It depends on the length of your operational period, the complexity of the incident, the preferences and rhythm of the IMT, and honestly, how disciplined your team is. And as planning section chief, sometimes you've got to crack the whip a little. Here's an example based on my own experience on multiple incidents. For an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. operational period, late morning strategy meeting, I usually set the strategy meeting for around 10:30 or 11 a.m. That gives operations and the incident commander time to see how the current operational period is unfolding before we start talking about tomorrow. Early afternoon, tactics meeting. I generally encourage the operations section chief to hold the tactics meeting shortly after lunch, around 1:30 p.m. That timing works well. People can have informal conversations over lunch, then the ops chief can take a few quiet minutes afterward to think, review the information, and hammer out the basics on assignments. The tactics meeting itself, 15 to 30 minutes, if you've prepared properly. Late afternoon, planning meeting. I typically set the planning meeting for around 4:45 p.m. By then, medical has completed the Form 206, communications has finished the Form 205, assignments are confirmed on the Form 204s, organizational structure is locked in on the Form 203. I would tell everyone, I want your forms to me no later than 4 p.m. That gave me time to assemble everything into a clean draft before presenting it formally. Once the planning meeting wrapped up, it was usually close to supper. People could go eat. I would finalize the document, then have the incident commander review and sign off. Evening, final prep. After supper, I'd wait until around 8 p.m. That gave us a cushion to ensure nothing major had changed. If things were still stable, I'd print the copies for the next morning's operational period briefing at 7 a.m. and at 8 a.m. sharp, we execute. That's it. That's the plain language version of the planning P. Now, in order to stay interoperable and aligned with doctrine, I did stick with some ICS terminology. Get used to it. That's called standardization. The big takeaway? It's not about the forms. It's about building a plan and clearly communicating that plan. And even more importantly, it's about mitigating whatever problem you're dealing with. If you understand the process and you respect things like form names, numbering, and the order of the incident action plan, you'll be just fine. In fact, you'll already be 10 steps ahead of most. There are solid resources online. FEMA has some good material if you want to dig deeper. You can always head to the library of Google, or if you want to learn it the practical way, plain language, real-world application, and yes, a little rebel edge, book a course with me. We'll get you squared away the right way. No fluff, no confusion, just a system that works. And that's it. That's the planning cycle. Plain language, real world, and fully interoperable. If this helped you understand ICS a little better, do me a favor. Like it, share it, comment on it, and subscribe. That's how this message reaches the people who actually need it. You can follow Dynam-ICS Training Solutions on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you want a little more unfiltered perspective, check out Mark, the ICS Rebel blog. I say the quiet parts out loud over there. If your organization needs custom ICS training, whether that's in-person, virtual, executive level, or a full program built around your specific industry, we do that. Healthcare, industry, public works, municipalities, First Nations, private sector, all kinds, all types and positions. If you want something that makes sense to your people and not just slide decks and forms, let's build it. Scan the QR code, reach out, and let's have a conversation. Until next time, stay sharp, stay interoperable, and don't be afraid to think a little rebel. Cheers, Rebel Mark.